My name is Ethan Cole. I'm not telling you this story because something dramatic happened all at once. I'm telling it because for most of my life, nothing dramatic happened at all. And that's where the problem began. I was 54 years old when I finally realized that being calm, patient, and quiet doesn't make you strong in everyone's eyes. To some people, it just makes you useful. The moment that changed everything didn't involve shouting, no argument, no public fight. It was just one sentence. Can you move for a second? That's it. Not rude, not loud, just confident enough to assume I would. And I did. I've always been predictable. I wake up at 5:30 every morning, even on weekends. Not because I have to, but because my body doesn't know any other way. Coffee first, black, no sugar, no cream. I eat the same breakfast most days. I leave for work at the same time. I take the same route, even though there are faster ones. People at the office used to joke about it. Ethan's like a clock, they'd say, always on time. I took that as a compliment. I worked as a senior compliance officer for a mid-sized firm. Not glamorous, but important. My job was simple: follow rules, catch mistakes, prevent problems before they grow teeth. I was good at it because I didn't rush. I didn't assume. I didn't improvise. I checked, then checked again. That habit came from my father. He was a mechanical engineer, quiet, exact, observant. He owned an old desk lamp, heavy base, chipped paint, warm yellow light. He used it every night, even when the rest of the room was dark. Once, when I was young, I asked him why he didn't just turn on the ceiling lights. He said, "Bright lights make people careless. This one makes me pay attention." After he passed away, that lamp was the only thing I kept. I've carried it through every move, every apartment, every house. It always sat on my desk, a reminder to look closely. I married Laura when I was 32. She was the opposite of me: social, expressive, quick to laugh. People gravitated toward her without trying. Her family was the same way. Loud dinners, constant opinions, everyone talking at once. At first I found it exciting, like stepping into a room that was already alive. But over time, I noticed something. In that room, there was always a rhythm, and I was never the one setting it. Decisions were made quickly, plans changed mid-sentence. If I hesitated, someone else filled the gap. So I stopped hesitating out loud. I told myself it didn't matter. It started with little things: where we sat at dinner, what time we arrived, which car we took. I'd offer a suggestion, someone would talk over it, and I'd let it go. "Doesn't matter," I'd say. Laura would squeeze my hand under the table, like that made it okay. Her brother Ryan was the most confident of them all. Not aggressive, just certain. Certain he was right. Certain people would follow, and they usually did, including me. The day everything shifted was a Sunday. Nothing special. Just a family lunch at Laura's parents' house, long wooden table, plates already set, food still steaming. I sat in my usual chair near the end. Laura sat beside me. Ryan walked in late, followed by a friend I barely knew. He glanced at the table, then at me. "Hey," he said casually, "can you move for a second?" I didn't respond right away. I waited for context. "For him," Ryan added, nodding toward the empty space beside Laura. "He's more comfortable there." I looked at Laura. She was focused on straightening her napkin. Didn't meet my eyes. No one else said anything. Not "it's fine," not "he's already sitting," not even my name. Just the soft clink of cutlery. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, louder than it should have been. Ryan smiled, satisfied, already pulling the other chair out. I moved to a smaller seat near the corner. No apology followed. No explanation. Conversation resumed like nothing had happened. I nodded when spoken to, ate slowly. Inside, something felt misaligned, not anger, something colder. That night, back home, I turned on my father's lamp. The familiar yellow light filled the room. For the first time in years, I didn't turn on anything else. I sat there, replaying the moment. Not the words, but the silence that followed them. That was when it hit me. No one had pushed me out of that seat. They just expected me to leave. And I had taught them to expect that. I didn't know it yet, but that small movement, standing up without protest, was going to cost me far more than a chair. It was going to cost me my name, my peace, and eventually the life I thought I understood. The next morning, nothing seemed different. The house smelled like fresh coffee and buttered toast, the kind of breakfast that makes you think life is ordinary. I poured a cup, black, and stood by the window. Outside, the world was pale and still. I expected nothing. I was wrong. My phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. All missed calls from Laura. I let them sit there, unanswered. It wasn't defiance. It was a small experiment. I wanted to see if the moment at the table mattered only to me, or if it had shaken something larger. Over the next few days, the subtlety of it all became clearer. Small things first. An extra charge on our joint account, temporary, she said. A favor, asked on behalf of her brother Ryan. Nothing urgent, just a signature here, a note there. I noticed that whenever I hesitated or asked for clarification, she'd smile and redirect. Don't worry, it's fine, really. It was the same dynamic as that chair at the table. I was expected to move, to accommodate, to disappear quietly. And like before, I did. It happened 2 weeks later. I was reviewing documents at home when the phone rang. It was from the bank. Mr. Cole, we need to discuss a personal line of credit that's past due, the agent said. I frowned. I hadn't opened any lines of credit. Let me check, I said, pulling up my statements. There it was, my name, signature attached, on a line of credit I never authorized. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. It wasn't anger yet. It was disbelief. I called Laura. She answered immediately. Oh, that, she said lightly, as if it were a small mistake. I thought you wouldn't mind helping me out. Ryan said it was just temporary. I stared at the phone. Temporary? I asked. I didn't sign anything. Well, it's on record. I just assumed, she started. Assumed, I interrupted. My voice stayed calm, steady, but inside something shifted. You cannot assume with my name, not on anything, ever. There was silence on the other end. Then, I just thought it would be easier. Easier. That word stuck in my mind like a splinter. Easier for whom? Not for me. I knew what had to happen. I started small, methodical. My father's lessons resurfaced. Document everything, I muttered to myself. Facts, dates, times, no embellishments. I pulled a notebook from the shelf. Every detail went in, no matter how minor. Date of conversation, exact words, who was present, actions taken. It was almost therapeutic. Almost. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like someone who could finally track the truth. I called my friend Walter, a retired attorney, now a volunteer at the local American Legion. Ethan, he said when I arrived, you look different. Not angry, just aware. I handed him the notebook. I need you to look at this, I said. He skimmed, then stopped at the signature page. Not you, he said simply. I nodded. No, it isn't. That's the point. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. This isn't family drama. This is identity misuse. If you let it slide, it won't stop. Next time, it could be a mortgage, retirement funds, your accounts, everything. I felt the weight of those words. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd only seen it as helping out, quiet accommodation, the same as moving from a chair at a dinner table. Now it was real, and it had teeth. I called Laura that evening. She tried to justify it. I didn't mean any harm, she said softly. It was just paperwork. Ryan said it was temporary. I thought I was helping. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I stayed calm. Helping with someone else's access to my name without my consent is not helping. It's stealing, I said. She hesitated. I just didn't want there to be a problem, she whispered. That was the moment I realized. People who push your boundaries will always try to frame it as your fault if you resist. Over the next week, the pressure increased. Ryan started texting me directly, politely at first, then impatiently. Laura's calls became daily, each one softer in tone, but insistent in content. It's easier if you just sign, just one signature. Small inconveniences in my day. Nothing overt, just reminders, missing receipts, delayed confirmations, subtle insinuations that my resistance caused unnecessary trouble. Everything pointed to one thing. If I moved quietly like before, it would all continue. I couldn't allow it. I went back to Walter. "Ethan," he said, "you need more than notes. You need proof." I nodded. I installed a doorbell camera at the house. I began recording conversations when I felt something important was about to be said. Everything counted. Tone, exact words, context. I also made digital copies of statements, emails, and account logs. I was building a shield. It finally happened one Saturday morning. Ryan came over casually. He didn't knock, just entered, confident, assuming I would accommodate him as I always had. He leaned against the kitchen counter. "Hey, Ethan," he said, "we need to talk about the account." I didn't rise from my chair. I didn't look up. "You need to sign," he continued. I exhaled slowly. "I will not sign," I said, calm. "No, not because I want to argue, not because I want to escalate, but because it isn't mine to sign." His face changed. Not anger, not fear. Something else. A realization that the quiet man at the table might actually mean what he says. He left that morning. He slammed the door behind him, small and precise. For the first time, my silence meant something. After he left, I sat at the table, notebook in hand. I wrote, date, Saturday morning. Event, Ryan requested signature. Response, declined. Calmly explained. Refusal, witness, none physically present. Doorbell recording active. I realized something then. The chair at the table had been trivial. The line of credit was serious. The chair taught me a lesson. The account demanded action. The rules I lived by for 50+ years, honesty, precision, patience, were about to be tested. And this time, there would be no easy accommodation. "Mr. Cole?" said the agent, voice clipped but professional. "Yes," I replied. "I'd like to file a fraud report regarding the personal line of credit under my name." There was a pause. "Of course, we'll start an investigation. I'll need you to submit all supporting documents and any proof of unauthorized signature." I hung up and looked at my notebook. Dates, times, messages, conversations, doorbell footage, bank statements, emails. All of it lined up like soldiers ready for inspection. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt responsible. I met Walter at the Legion that afternoon. "Ethan," he said, eyes scanning my notes. "You've done everything right so far. But remember, evidence doesn't argue itself. Presentation matters." I nodded, flipping through the notebook. "I want this clean," I said. "No theatrics, just facts. The bank, the courts, anyone who listens. Facts only." Walter smiled faintly. "You're learning something a lot of people never do. Silence isn't weakness. Documentation is strength. Let them speak. You listen. Let the evidence talk." Laura called that evening. "Ethan, please, can we just handle this privately? Don't involve anyone else," she pleaded. "I'm not ignoring you," I said. "I'm documenting, that's all. Nothing private about protecting my name." She sighed. "I thought you'd understand. I thought—" I cut her off, calmly. "I understand that you acted. I don't understand why you thought you could act on my behalf without permission." There was silence, and then a soft, almost inaudible, "I didn't mean to hurt you." Words, finally. 3 days later, Investigator Reynolds called. "Mr. Cole, we need to meet and review the case. Your account shows multiple transactions, signatures, and attempted communications. It appears someone acted without authorization. I'll need you to provide the records you've collected." I took the folder, the notebook, and the doorbell footage. As I drove to the credit union, I realized the cold outside didn't matter. The quiet was my ally. Focus, documentation, truth. Reynolds greeted me in a small office, beige walls, fluorescent lights. "No dramatics," he said, "just the facts." I handed him the notebook. "Everything," I said. He skimmed, nodding. "Good, very clear. We'll compare signatures, review the transactions, and interview all relevant parties." I left knowing the system was moving. Not fast, not perfectly, but moving. Later that week, Ryan showed up again. This time, with Laura. They walked in, confident, smiling, acting as though I would still yield. I didn't rise. I didn't acknowledge their smiles. "Ethan," Laura said softly, "we can fix this. Just sign the papers. It's easier." I looked at Ryan. "You've asked that before," I said. "This is not easier. It's illegal. And I will not sign anything that isn't mine." Ryan's face tightened. Laura's eyes watered. The silence stretched. Heavy, real, unbroken. "You don't understand," Laura said, trembling. "It was just a mistake." I exhaled slowly. "Not a mistake. A boundary. And you crossed it." They left without another word. For the first time, I realized how powerful calm resolve could be. No shouting, no anger, just facts and a refusal to yield. Over the next 2 days, I called several people who had been present during past discussions. Neighbors who overheard conversations about the account, bank employees who could confirm transactions, and signatures Walter, who reviewed all documentation. I asked for exact wording, times, and context. Every testimony went into my notebook. Each entry was short, factual, precise. It was tedious, exhausting. But it worked. For the first time, I wasn't guessing. I had control. Not over the people, not over the situation, but over the record of truth. The email that changed everything. Then late Thursday, an email arrived from the bank. Subject: preliminary findings. Mr. Cole, the signature comparison has been completed. Discrepancies are significant. No match. Case will be forwarded to legal for further action. Please retain all documentation for court proceedings. I leaned back in my chair. Relief didn't come. Clarity did. Finally, someone else recognized what I already knew. My name had been misused. Walter advised me on the court procedure. Dress neatly. Speak clearly. Only the facts. let the evidence talk. I chose my father's old suit jacket, polished shoes, and a calm demeanor. I reviewed every line in my notebook. Every fact had its place. Every message had context. I realized then something else. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't about the account or signatures. It was about standing up for myself when everyone expected me to stay quiet. Monday arrived. The courthouse smelled like metal and old paper. Laura and Ryan were there, nervous, quiet, slightly restrained. I walked in with my folder, my notebook, and the doorbell footage on a flash drive. Walter by my side, calm. The judge called the case. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you're contesting a guarantor signature on a personal line of credit. You claim your identity was used without consent. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. Laura's lawyer spoke first. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said. "Mrs. Cole believed she had permission to sign on behalf of her husband." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Belief is not consent," she said firmly. "Do you have proof Mr. Cole consented?" No written proof existed. No verbal proof mattered. I handed over the flash drive. Audio from the night of the first breach. Clear. Ryan laughing. Laura speaking. Misuse confirmed. The judge listened intently. No interruptions. No dramatics. Just truth. The judge nodded. The statements indicate an expectation that Mr. Cole would absorb a debt without consent. That speaks to intent. Laura and Ryan didn't protest. I didn't need them to. The case was forwarded to the county attorney. Financial counseling was required for Laura. Access to accounts was restricted. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe in my own name. Driving home, I realized something. The chair at the table, the shove, the unspoken expectations. They were all practice for this moment. I hung my father's clock on the wall when I returned. The ticking felt steadier than ever. I sat beneath it, coffee in hand, and allowed myself to breathe without guilt. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. The days after the hearing moved slowly, almost deliberately. The system had taken over. Paperwork, emails, and phone calls happened without me needing to chase them. The county attorney confirmed receipt of the case file, and Laura's accounts were temporarily frozen until her financial counseling was completed. Ryan stayed away, calling only once to leave a voicemail heavy with frustration, but light on facts. I didn't respond. I returned to my normal life. Morning coffee, toast, the quiet hum of the heater. Evenings with the news on low volume, a book or crossword nearby. Nothing spectacular, nothing dramatic. But it was mine. I walked around my house, touching familiar surfaces, the armrest of my recliner, the edge of the kitchen counter, my father's clock. Each small act grounded me. I realized I hadn't noticed how tense my shoulders had been, how my body had flinched at small noises. The bruises on my side were gone, but the memory remained, a faint echo of pain. Pain that reminded me I had stood my ground. One late afternoon, a text from Laura appeared. "Ethan, I don't know how to make this right. I just want peace." I stared at it for a long moment before replying, "Peace comes from accountability, not apologies. Do what's asked and let the system move." She didn't respond immediately, and that was fine. I had learned that silence could be stronger than words. 2 days later, she emailed confirmation of her financial counseling and the steps she had taken to comply with the restrictions. Everything was documented. Everything was moving in the right direction. I allowed myself a small sense of relief. Not happiness, not victory, just relief. The clock had become more than a timepiece. It was a reminder, a symbol of steadiness in a world that had tried to push me off balance. One morning, I cleaned the dust off its walnut frame, winding it carefully. The ticking sounded louder than usual, deliberate, patient. I sat beneath it, coffee in hand, and thought about the table, the shove, the unspoken disrespect. I realized the chair had never been the point. The point had always been knowing where I belonged when the noise stopped. Ryan tried one last time to reach me. His voicemail was strained, thin with frustration. "Ethan, can we talk? I didn't mean for it to go this far. I deleted it without reply. There was nothing to negotiate anymore. The system had handled what needed handling, and I didn't need to justify myself to someone who refused to see the truth. I visited Walter at the Legion that week. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "Clearer," I replied. "Not lighter, just clearer." He nodded knowingly. "That's what it feels like. When you stop trying to fix everyone else's mistakes, you tell the truth, step back, and let the consequences unfold. People may not like it, but they can't argue with clarity." I smiled faintly. "I learned that the hard way." Walter chuckled. "Some lessons only arrive when you're willing to stand alone." Weeks passed. Laura's compliance was confirmed. Ryan sold his car and moved temporarily to another city for work. Their presence faded, like shadows at sunset. I didn't seek updates. I didn't inquire. I allowed them to retreat into their own decisions. The absence was quiet, almost peaceful. No shouting matches, no dramatic confrontations, just distance. I spent more time in small routines, grounding myself in the tangible. Brewing coffee each morning, walking down the quiet streets, noticing snowbanks melting into tired piles, reading letters from friends, fixing minor electrical issues for neighbors, the work I knew so well. Each act reminded me that my hands still worked, my mind still observed, my choices still mattered. The days began to settle. Not perfectly, not without reminders of what had happened, but with a sense of ownership over my life. One evening, I went to the dining table, where it had all begun. The chair at the head, once contested, now sat empty. I traced the wood grain with my fingers. Memories of shoves, of unspoken words, of silence filled the room. But instead of pain, I felt a strange sense of ownership, not over the chair itself, but over how I had handled the events. I realized then that dignity didn't need an audience. Respect didn't need validation. Sometimes the bravest act is standing quietly, refusing to participate in chaos. A few weeks later, a short letter arrived from Laura. "Ethan, I wanted to acknowledge what happened. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to admit my mistakes. I'm taking steps to ensure nothing like this happens again." Laura, I read it twice, then set it aside. No triumph, no anger, just acknowledgement. That was enough. Walter helped me move the clock from its temporary corner back to my wall. We carried it carefully, feeling the weight, both literal and symbolic. "Steady," Walter said, patting my shoulder. I hung it in the center of the living room. The ticking was patient, honest, unyielding. Sitting beneath it, I understood. The clock had never represented power. It had represented memory, and memory could not be stolen, only ignored. Life continued, slowly, methodically. Brandon's messages ceased entirely. Laura and Ryan's influence faded. Routine returned as a quiet anchor. I walked the streets, drank coffee, listened to the ticking. I didn't flinch at sudden movements. I didn't feel the urge to smooth over every disruption. I was present. Final reflections. I understood something that had taken years to learn. Patience isn't silence. Kindness isn't erasure. Peace doesn't come from ignoring wrongs. It comes from addressing them with clarity. Dignity doesn't need applause. Respect doesn't need witnesses. The hardest moments often require standing quietly, taking the facts, and refusing to yield to chaos. And that, I realized, was enough. One night, I sat beneath my father's clock with a cup of coffee, watching the street light flicker on outside. The house settled around me, familiar and solid. The ticking filled the room, steady and patient. I realized then, the seat I lost at the table, the shove, the conflicts, they had all taught me where I belonged when the noise stopped. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt home. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The winter slowly loosened its grip on the neighborhood. Snowbanks melted into tired piles along the curb, the sidewalks returning to grey and cracked reality. Morning coffee became a ritual I could trust, and the quiet of my house felt like something I had earned. No one was calling. No one was demanding explanations. No one needed me to fix what they had broken. The absence of noise was strange at first, almost foreign, but it was honest. I spent long hours at the table, sometimes just staring at my father's clock, the ticking steady and unwavering. The moments at Carol's house, the shove, the fraudulent paperwork, the court hearings, they had all left marks, but not the ones that showed on skin or furniture. These were marks on my mind, lessons etched deep enough that they wouldn't fade, even if the world tried to ignore them. I understood more clearly than ever that truth had weight. It was heavy, uncomfortable, but also grounding. Once spoken and acted upon, it could no longer be twisted, ignored, or erased. In the following weeks, I focused on reclaiming my space, both literal and emotional. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, letting the placement reflect how I wanted to move through the house, not how others dictated. I filed documents meticulously, every statement, receipt, and correspondence labeled and stored. These weren't weapons. They were reminders of boundaries I had finally learned to enforce. I reconnected with old friends, people who didn't need me to mediate chaos for them. Every small act was part of a larger reclaiming of life. Each cup of coffee, each quiet evening, each careful walk reminded me my life didn't belong to anyone else. Walter became a constant, quiet presence. We'd meet at the Legion for coffee. Sometimes we'd talk about old cases, electrical work, life in Madison, and sometimes we just sat in silence. "Steady, you've learned," he said one afternoon, tapping his newspaper. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You told the truth. You didn't flinch, and you let the system handle it. Most men never do that. They either fight or they collapse. You did neither." I nodded. It felt like recognition, but more than that, it was confirmation that I could survive without being pulled into drama, that strength could be quiet and patient, not loud and performative. I spent many evenings beneath the ticking of my father's clock. It was more than a machine that measured time. It was memory, presence, continuity. Every tick reminded me that life moved forward, whether I was ready or not. I thought about the table, the shove, the silence, the fraudulent paperwork. Those events had forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone would respect me, my name, or my life. But the clock reminded me that what could be stolen was only what I allowed to be. My dignity, my choices, my memory, they were mine, and no one could take them without consent. Messages from Brandon eventually stopped. No apologies, no confrontations, no arguments, just silence. Laura sent one final note confirming she had completed all requirements. No drama, no excuses, just facts. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The system had handled what it was designed to handle. I had done what I needed to do. Tell the truth, document it, and step back. Messages from Brandon eventually stopped. No apologies, no confrontations, no arguments, just silence. Laura sent one final note confirming she had completed all requirements. No drama, no excuses, just facts. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The system had handled what it was designed to handle. I had done what I needed to do. Tell the truth, document it, and step back. I realized something essential about victory. It wasn't about proving someone wrong, taking revenge, or reclaiming status. It was about standing steady while the world tried to push you off balance. I walked around my neighborhood, noticing small details I had never had the patience to see. Children sliding on the last patches of ice, neighbors chatting by mailboxes, dogs straining on leashes, eager for a run. These ordinary moments felt profound because I could observe them without distraction, without chaos, without having to intervene in someone else's mistakes. Reflection on family. I thought about Carol, about Brandon, about Ryan. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't resentful. I was clear. Some people would never understand boundaries, respect, or accountability. That was their struggle, not mine. Family could be complicated. It could hurt. It could disappoint. But clarity, honesty, and standing firm in your truth, that was something no one could take away. Full circle with the clock. The clock became more than a symbol. It was a rhythm to life, steady, patient, honest. I brewed coffee, sat beneath it, and let the ticking mark the passing of time in my own home, on my own terms. It reminded me, strength doesn't need applause. Peace doesn't come from ignoring reality. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just standing still. And that was enough. The final lesson. Over time, I came to a quiet understanding. Life will test you with disrespect, lies, and manipulation. You can't control the actions of others. You can control your response. Sometimes, the bravest choice is silence in the face of chaos, documenting truth, and letting consequences unfold. Sometimes, the bravest choice is walking away without a fight, yet refusing to let the noise erase your dignity. A month later, Walter and I met one last time at the Legion. He asked how I was doing. Better, I said. Clearer, more steady, he added. Yes, I replied. We sat in silence for a while, finishing our coffee. No advice, no judgment, just the quiet affirmation that life goes on and you survive if you hold your ground without losing yourself. I started to plan small things, repairs around the house, organizing old photographs, taking short walks to clear my mind. Life wasn't dramatic or perfect, but it was mine. I had reclaimed my name, my space, my peace, and the ticking of my father's clock, steady as ever, marked the passing of moments that I now knew belonged entirely to me. One evening, after the sun had set, I sat in the living room with the lights low. The clock ticked steadily. I sipped coffee. The world outside continued, indifferent and unhurried. And I felt home. Not because nothing had happened, not because conflicts were erased, but because I had learned where I belonged when the noise finally stopped. Silence, routine, and the patience to watch life unfold, that was the real victory. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need recognition. I only needed the quiet, the steady rhythm, the knowledge that I had done what was right, and that was enough. And with that thought, I finally allowed myself to breathe fully, completely, and without fear.